Hi, it's Satveer again. So this is video 3 of 3 on self-harm. I would highly recommend you watch the first 2 videos before watching this one, because the first video was really looking at what we're talking about, what we mean when we say self-harm, and that might be a slightly different definition to what you're normally used to. The second video was looking at the kind of experiences that can lead someone to self-harm and the functions of that behaviour. And the purpose of that is to help you better understand what's behind self-harm for the individual. This video will be looking at how best to respond to someone who's self-harming. So it's a very general response, because I don't know who's watching this. You could be watching it from a professional's perspective, a parent, carer, loved one, best friend, or an interested individual who's just wondering what they should do just in case they come across someone. So I'll give you a foundation response, and then we'll also direct you to the websites and apps that will be linked to on the site. So do take a look at them as well. And they'll be beneficial for you as a professional, parent, carer, loved one who's supporting someone, or if you yourself are self-harming, some more support on how to reduce your self-harm and where else you can get support from. So, what kind of response should we have? In the first instance, as with anybody who's in distress, because remember, it's distress that leads to self-harm for the vast majority, obvious as it sounds, you need to stay calm. Not being panicked, oh my God, what have you done? Why do you keep doing this to yourself? What have you done that for? Is not going to help. If anything, it could make the individual feel bad, could knock their self-confidence and self-esteem further, make them feel judged. So stay calm. The second response, if we know someone is self-harming or they've disclosed self-harm to us, is, do they need any medical intervention? Anybody who says that they've ingested substances like bleach, for example, or taken an overdose, inserted or swallowed foreign objects, does require an urgent medical response. Don't ask them to prove it, you have to take their word for it. Of course, you can't force someone to get medical intervention, but you've got to recommend it. And then if you are a professional, or if you become extremely concerned about someone's welfare, never hesitate to call 999. Other injuries like cuts, burns, scratches that may appear medically superficial, dependent on who you are and what your role is in this person's life. It may be that you treat them on site in the home, or you could help them to treat their own injuries. And remember, providing advice on how to look after, say, a cut or a burn, isn't encouraging self-harm. It's helping reduce risk. If someone refuses medical intervention, then, as I said before, if you're very worried about their well-being, do call 999. But if they do refuse it, please do let them know where they can go if they do get concerned about any injuries. So, for example, you can call your doctor, you can go to A&E, you can call me if that's appropriate, they can call you back. If you're a professional, another member of the team. Do tell people, because keeping them safe and well is of the utmost importance. But once we've dealt with the medical side of the self-harm, then we need to really look at what's behind the behaviour. So remembering self-harm is a symptom of underlying distress. We've dealt with the symptom. The rest of the response needs to be knowing that just because you know someone's self-harming doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to talk about it. And this can be a very difficult concept for some people to accept, because sometimes people feel like they're not doing enough. They should be fixing them. But what is fixing? If I'm self-harming, I might need you to know that I'm in distress right now. And what I need from you may be a safe place to sit, somewhere safe to go, support, attending to any medical needs I have, someone to talk to. Not necessarily about my issues, but just someone to talk to. That doesn't mean you're not supporting me if I don't talk to you about my underlying issues. If you're there for me, that's what it's about. And never underestimate the power of simply sitting and being with someone. And don't think you're failing them if they're not talking to you, because they simply may not be ready in that moment. I might come to you about an injury or an instance of self-harm. Have you helped me support any medical needs I have? Then not talk about it until a day or 5 days or a week or a month later. Because in that moment I just needed my medical injuries to be treated, but I was still in too much distress to talk about the underlying issues. The kind of response that really helps is one that is non-judgmental. It's not questioning why someone's done it. It's about not putting pressure on the individual to talk, allowing them to talk when they're ready to. So saying things like, I'm here for you, if and when you want to talk, but also accepting that you may not be the person they want to talk to. If you don't want to talk to me, that's absolutely fine, you may say, but these services are available. And that might mean you can talk to your GP, or it might be a counselling service. For a young person, they might be able to talk to someone in school. Give them options, but don't feel that you should be the only option for them. It's also important to ask them what they would like. What would you like me to do? It's a very simple but very important thing we should ask, because the individual should have some control over the situation. And be honest about who you've got to tell, if anybody, and why. And this will be especially important with young people and professionals working with young people. So it's important that you know your policies and procedures, because the impact of you telling someone could be massive on them. For an adult, they may feel they may lose their job, their children, if they have them. It may be detrimental on relationships. And for young people, their biggest fear may be they get taken away from home, get put into care. Their parents find out and they get told off, or they disappoint their parents. So please make sure that you are honest and clear with the individual about who you've got to tell and why that is. And then it's about offering alternatives as well, because I have told you I self-harm, or you know that I self-harm. I may not be ready to talk about it, or I am talking to someone. I might be engaging in therapy, but I'm still self-harming. And nobody wants to see someone hurting themselves, but we also have to acknowledge that it's not that easy to stop. So what alternatives could you offer an individual? Now, there's hundreds of alternatives out there, and there's an app that's going to be linked to the site called Calm Harm, which is really good to download because it provides alternative strategies to self-harm. But there's also alternatives on websites like Mind and Young Minds, etc. But you might see things like pinging an elastic band on your wrist, or writing thoughts down and ripping them up into little pieces, holding an ice cube on the palm of your hand and watching it melt, or writing on your body with a marker pen. The problem comes when people go to individuals who self-harm. Stop self-harming and use this elastic band. Stop self-harming and write on your body with a marker pen. There is no like for self-harm, and for that individual they may become frustrated because they're thinking, how's this working? How is this the same as me cutting myself or burning myself or hitting myself? So it's important to acknowledge that there is no like for like, but we're promoting the functions of self-harm. So you may say to someone, okay, listen, I know you're getting the support, or you're not ready to talk about it, however, I don't want you to be hurting yourself. Even on one occasion, if you try pinging an elastic band, that could be your control or your distraction or your self-punishment because it hurts. Or instead of you burning yourself or engraving words or images onto your body, you might write on your body with a red marker pen. And that's your control and your distraction and your self-punishment. So we work with the functions, and even if they do it once, that's one less time they hurt themselves. The other thing we need to know is that the language we use can have an impact. So don't say things like, oh, you're a self-harmer, or refer to people as self-harmers. That's not what someone is. It's not their identity. Self-harm is a behaviour. So you're working with someone who self-harms, or your friend is self-harming, but they're not a self-harmer. It's really detrimental. Also not making an assumption such as, oh, I thought it only happened to teenage girls, when you're working with a 42-year-old male. This assumption that it only happens to teenage girls would be wrong. Male self-harm, female self-harm, older people self-harm, younger people self-harm. 107 3 to 9-year-olds were admitted into hospital for self-harm in the year 2016 to 17 in England. Older adults will self-harm. But if we go around saying it's a teenage girl problem, it puts barriers in place. Saying things like, oh, it's just attention seeking, or it's just a cry for help, is really dismissive. Don't have that response. That can often come from anger or fear. Or it's an easy way to dismiss it, especially when it is adolescents who are self-harming. Oh, it's just attention seeking. Oh, it's just a cry for help. Oh, it's just a phase or a trend. Someone is seeking attention and someone is crying for help, so it's really important that we respond to that. Maybe they do not have the ability or the confidence to say how they're feeling and what's going on. They might be scared of the consequences of disclosing what's behind their self-harm. But the only way they can communicate the distress they're in is by hurting themselves. And what they're communicating is distress, not self-harm. So don't shut them down. Don't say things like, oh, it's just superficial when you look at an injury. Oh, it was just superficial. You may tell your colleagues or other family members or friends about the individual. I'm saying it's not that important, don't worry about it. You may say it to the individual, not meaning it in a horrible way. Oh, phew, it's just superficial. All self-harm is serious. The message you may give out is, do it better. It's not good enough. So please respond to self-harm appropriately. Don't be scared. What you've got to remember is it's someone who's in distress. That's what it is. It's a communication of that distress. And if you ever see injuries on someone and you're concerned about them, firstly, don't assume they must be self-harm, especially if they're on certain parts of the body like the forearm. It could be accidental, it could be abuse. But don't ignore it either. Sometimes people don't want to approach someone because they don't think it's their business, it's not their place, they don't want to offend them. The worst I can do is tell you to sod off, or words to that effect. Just say, I've noticed you had some marks on your arm or wherever it may be. I just wanted to check that you're okay. I'm here if you want to talk to me. And if you don't want to talk to me, these are the people you can talk to. Something as simple as that can be really powerful. Otherwise, a person may feel invisible. And if they don't want to talk to you, that's absolutely fine. And if they do, then listen to them. It doesn't mean you have to fix them. We have to move away from wanting to fix people and instead listen. I've been really fortunate that I'm now sitting here making this video. People often say, at what stage did you get to being like this? Have you recovered? And that's the final thing I want to say to you guys. If you're self-harming, or if you're supporting someone who's self-harming, recovery will mean different things to different people. For me, recovery means I can do work like this without having the urge to self-harm afterwards. I can openly talk about self-harm. I can go through crises in my life and not self-harm. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, I wasn't in that position. Whereas someone else may say recovery is never doing it again. Someone else may say not doing it to the extent I used to. It depends on the person. So ask them what they see as recovery. But you can come through self-harm. If you deal with your underlying issues, which is not easy to do, it's probably the hardest thing I ever did in my life was talk about my problems. If anything, I found it easy to self-harm at times because it was less painful. But once I did start talking about my underlying issues, the level of distress I was going through on a daily level decreased. And thereby, naturally, without me even ever focusing upon it, my urge for self-harm decreased. And even though now I have crap days, because they're inevitable, everybody will have them, I found other ways of managing that distress. For me, it's playing on the PlayStation, because I'm a big kid. For someone else, it might be mindfulness, or colouring in, or going to the gym, or chilling with friends, or binge watching TV. You find your alternative. But if you do end up self-harming again, that doesn't make you a failure, because you've got to focus on all the times you haven't self-harmed and all the difficult scenarios you've come through where you haven't had the urge to self-harm. And those people who are supporting someone who self-harms, professionally or personally, know that they can overcome this. It will take time, and it's not as simple as simply stopping self-harming and doing something else. It's about reducing the risk to them, providing them with alternatives, and then being ready to support them when they're ready for that support. That can take time because they may need to build up trust and confidence because of previous negative experiences they've had, or consequences that have occurred to them for letting someone know that they were struggling before. They're fearful are going to repeat themselves again. Please do look at all the sites that have been made available, and if you do need further support, do not hesitate to contact national organisations like Samaritans, who are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Do look after yourselves, and thank you very much for your time.